Alright. Hey all, it's me, Ryan, from DXR Warriors, and today I'm going to be doing a deck profile for my competitively viable Pendulum Magician deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! So this deck is pretty generic. If you watch the Pro Play Tour with, with Jeremy Mitchell, this deck list will look pretty similar, but I thought I'd share it out on our channel anyway, just because I enjoy doing these deck profiles. So this is going to be a little longer since all the effects on my cards are pretty important. So this will be a longer deck profile. First off, we are running 3 Chronograph Sorcerer. It's a Pendulum skill 8 during your main phase, and I'll be reading it in order of Pendulum effect, then Monster effect. During your main phase, you can destroy this card, and if you do, take 1 Time Gazer Magician from your hand or deck and either place it in your Pendulum zone and special summon it. You can only use this effect of Chronograph Sorcerer once per turn. So that's alright. Sometimes I'll use that for scales. And then, if a card or cards you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon this card from your hand, and special summon another monster from your hand. You don't have to summon that extra monster. The second effect on the monster effect is more about the Supreme King Zark thing, which we do not run. So I'm not going to go over that effect. And just to go with your Chronograph Sorcerer, I do run 1 Time Gazer Magician. It's not that important, the effects. You'll usually just use it as a scale 8 or special summon it out for a link summon. Probably the best of all the magicians by far. We've got 3 copies of Harmonizing Magician. It's a scale 8. All monsters you control gain 100 attack and defense for each face-up Magician Pendulum monster with different names in your extra deck for its Pendulum effect. And now it is a tuner, which is pretty important. And so now for its monster effect. Cannot be special summoned from the extra deck. Cannot be used as material for a fusion, synchro, or exceeds summon unless all other materials are Magician Pendulum monsters. When this card is Pendulum summoned from the hand, you can special summon 1 Magician Pendulum monster from your deck in defense position, except Harmonizing Magician. But it has its effects negated, also banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use that effect once per turn. So Harmonizing can get you to anything. You can summon a magician of any level if you want to do it that way. You can summon something for a link summon, exceed summon, a synchro summon. It is super, super powerful. Next up, we are running 3 copies of Wisdom Eye Magician. Wisdom Eyes, so his Pendulum effect is what's really important about him. He's a scale 5. If you have a Magician or Performapal card in your other Pendulum zone, you can destroy this card, and if you do, place 1 Magician Pendulum monster from your deck in your Pendulum zone, except for Wisdom Eye. So you can basically send it to the extra deck so you can Pendulum summon it later, and get a better card in your scale. Very powerful. And his monster effect, you can discard it and then target a card in the Pendulum zone whose Pendulum scale is different from the original, and then return it to normal. That's basically never going to be used. You're always using it as just a level 4 generic magician, or for its Pendulum effect. Now then, we've got 2 Black Fang Magician. It's a scale 8. You're typically going to use this and then an Oath Dragon Magician, which I'll go into for your scales. Once Pendulum effect, once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. Its attack becomes half its current attack until the end of the turn, then destroy that card. Monster effect, he's always treated as an Exceeds Dragon card for the Zark engine, but I'm not running that. If this card's destroyed by battle or a card effect, you can target 1 Dark Spellcaster monster in your graveyard, special summon it. Pretty good, especially if you're detaching Pendulum monsters as Exceeds material, because if you do that, they don't go to the extra deck, they go to the grave. Then we're last for the magicians. Scale 1. Pendulum effect, once per turn, if your Dark Spellcaster monster battles before damage calculation, you can activate this effect. That monster gains 1,200 attack until the end of the damage step, then destroy this card. Monster effect, if this card's destroyed by battle or card effect, target 1 face-up monster on the field and destroy it. That is an optional effect. Next, we are running 2 Oath Dragon Magician. Scale 2, if you have a Magician Pendulum effect is why we use this card. If you have a Magician card in your other Pendulum zone, you can add one face-up Magician or Odd Eyes Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, except Oath Dragon Magician. You can only use this effect of Oath Dragon Magician once per turn. He's a level 6, so we can use it along with Chronograph Sorcerer for some Xyz plays. With a monster effective, when this card's normal special summon, you can add a Magician Pendulum monster or Odd Eyes monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. So when he's when he's a monster, you get it from the graveyard instead of the extra deck. And then for the last of Magicians, I'm running one Janky Magician and one Dragon Pit Magician for level 7s. Neither of their effects are really important, although they can be used somewhat situationally. I run them because they're level 7s, because one of our boss monsters in the extra deck uses level 7s to be summoned. Alright, moving on to the rest of the monsters that are not Pendulum. Supreme King, we've got 3 Supreme King Dragon Darkworm. His Pendulum effect's not important. But if he's normal or special summoned, you can add one Supreme King Gate Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. And if he's in your graveyard and you control no monsters, you can special summon it. You can only use each of those effects once per turn. So, we'll be using that effect turn 1 to special summon it for free, and get one of our 2 Supreme King Gate 0. Another level 7. Again, I don't typically use it for its I never use it for its effect or put it in the scale. I just use it to summon for a level 7. And then for the typical kind of engine, I'll do a combo tutorial in another video. 3 Mythical Beast Master Cerberus. We always use him for his Pendulum effect. He's a level 8, so you can't Pendulum summon him or any of that. You don't use him for any plays. But if you have no other card in your other Pendulum zone, you can destroy this card, and if you do, add one level 7 or lower Mythical Beast effect monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect of Mythical Beast Master Cerberus once per turn. So you'll play him in the Pendulum zone, play nothing else in the Pendulum zone, destroy him, and add one copy of our 2 Mythical Beast Jackal King from our deck to our hand. So, if you have no card in your other Pendulum zone, you can destroy this card, and if you do, special summon one Mythical Beast Pendulum monster from your extra deck, except Jackal King. You can only use this effect once per turn. So basically, you get a free summon into the extra zone, and if you do that along with Darkworm, you've already got a link too. So that's it for our monster lineup. Now we're going to move on to the spells. I actually don't run any hand traps or trap cards in this deck. So we're running 3 Pendulum Call. Very, very important. It's good to see this in your opening hand. Discard 1 card. Add 2 Magician Pendulum monsters with different names from your deck to your hand. Also, until the end of your opponent's next turn, after this card resolves, Magician cards in your Pendulum zones cannot be destroyed by card effects. You can only activate 1 Pendulum Call per turn. And if you've used a Magician card, Magician's Pendulum effect before, you can't activate this card. But you can activate Magician Pendulum effects after. Another thing to note is that Mythical Beasts, per se, are not Magicians, so you can use their Pendulum effects, then activate Call. I'm probably going to cut this card, but for now I have 3 Wavering Eyes. Destroy as many cards in each player's Pendulum zones as possible, then apply these effects in sequence depending on the number of cards destroyed by this effect. 1 or more, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. 2 or more, add 1 Pendulum monster from your main deck to the hand. 3 or more, banish 1 card on the field. 4 copies, you can add another copy to your hand. So this is decent, but I'm going to probably put it in the side deck for the mirror match. It's not that important. I always end up discarding it. And then for our draw power, we run 3 Allure of Darkness. Most of our Magicians are dark, so you draw 2 cards, banish a dark monster from your hand, and if you don't have one in your hand, you send your entire hand to the graveyard. It's pretty good. And then finally, in order to get our Darkworm to the graveyard to start our plays, we are running 2 Dragon Shrine and 1 Foolish Burial. That's it for the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck now, we have a pretty big variety in the extra deck. First off, we are running 1 Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon, and you might be asking, Ryan, why aren't you using any fusion cards if you have a fusion monster in your extra deck? I'll explain that when the time comes. But when this card's special summoned, you can target one face-up attack position monster your opponent controls, return it to the hand. During either player's turn, when a spell or trap card or another monster's effect is activated, you can shuffle one face-up Pendulum monster from your extra deck into the deck, negate the activation, and destroy that card. You can only use this effect once per turn. So he's our negate. He's kind of the boss monster of this deck, if I say so. If I had to say, he's pretty important, and he's a pretty good card too. Next up, we're moving on to the synchros. We'll always be summoning these cards with the Harmonizing Magician. So first, we've got one Supreme King Dragon Clearwing, one tuner, one non-tuner Dark Pendulum monsters, which you can achieve pretty easily with Harmonizing. When this card is synchro summoned, you can destroy all face-up monsters your opponent controls. Once per turn, before damage calculation, if this card battles an opponent's monster, you can destroy that monster, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the destroyed monster's attack. If this card is in your graveyard, you can contribute 2 Supreme King Dragon monsters special summon this card. So that can happen if you have some Dark Worms, but not too important. Not the monster, but that's the second effect. Then I'm running, this is kind of an infrequent choice for a lot of people for some reason, but I'm running one Enlightenment Paladin. Level 8, one tuner, one or more non-tuners, pretty generic. If this card is synchro summoned using Magician Pendulum Monsters material, you can target one spell card in your graveyard, add it to your hand. You can only use this effect of Enlightenment Paladin once per turn. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. So he's kind of like Dragon Clearwing, actually. Then, I don't know if I'm going to keep this card in deck, because it's kind of situational, but I am running one Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon. When he's special summoned, you can target one card in your Pendulum Zone, special summon it, and he can't attack for the rest of the turn. Monsters in your opponent's possession can't activate their effects during the battle phase. That's why I run it, but I don't see myself going into it too terribly often, but I have used it before, and it's worked when I do summon it. Then we're running one Ignister Prominence, the Blasting Draco Slayer, one tuner, one or more non-tuner Pendulum monsters. Once per turn, you can target one Pendulum monster on the field or one card in the Pendulum Zone, destroy it, and if you do, shuffle one card on the field into the deck. That's really good because it doesn't target. He has another effect, but it's only for the Draco Slayer deck itself, so I'm not going to go over it. Then, of course, last synchro monster, one Borreload Savage Dragon. If he's synchro summoned, you can equip one Link monster from your graveyard to this card, and if you do, place Boral counters on this card equal to that Link monster's Link rating. This card gains an attack equal to half the attack of the monster equipped to it by this effect. When your opponent activates a card or effect, this is a quick effect, you can remove one Boral counter from this card, negate the activation. You can only use this effect of Borreload Savage Dragon once per turn. That's it for the synchro monsters. Now we're going to move on to the XCs. We are running a few of every single extra deck monster in this deck, which is kind of cool. We're running one Abyss Dweller for the Salamangreat matchup. Very powerful card. 2 level 4 monsters, no special requirements. The effect that's important is once per turn, during either player's turn, you can detach one Xyz material from this card. Any card effects that can activate in your opponent's graveyard cannot be activated this turn. Salamangreat matchup in a nutshell. Kind of our pushing for game card. We've got one Supreme King Dragon Dark Rebellion, 2 level 4 Dark Pendulum monsters. Once per turn, before damage calculation, if this card battles an opponent's monster, you can detach one material from this card until the end of this turn, change the attack of that face-up opponent's monster to 0, and this card gains attack equal to the original attack of that opponent's monster. During the battle phase, quick effect, you can return this card to the extra deck, special summon up to 2 Supreme King Dragon or Supreme King Gate Pendulum monsters from your extra deck in defense position. So that effect can be used to summon some other cards, but I wouldn't use it too often since you want to use that card to push for game. Then we are running one Time Star Magician, 2 level 4 Magician Pendulum monsters, so you can't use Dark Worm or any of your other level 4s that are not Magicians. It must first be Xyz summoned with the above Xyz materials. Once per turn, you can detach one Xyz material from this card, add to your hand one Dark Spellcaster type monster from your deck, graveyard, or face up from the extra deck to your hand.
once per turn, if a Pendulum monster card or cards in your monster zone or Pendulum zone will be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can send one Spellcaster type monster from your deck to the graveyard instead. This card is really powerful because that effect of sending something from the deck to the grave is not once per turn. So he's a really strong card, a search card, and protection for your Pendulum monsters. For our level 6 monsters like Chronograph and Oath Dragon, we run 1 Norito the Mortal Leader. He requires 2 level 6 Spellcaster monsters. Once per turn during either player's turn, when your opponent activates a spell or trap card, you can detach 1 Excuse material from this card and negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. And so now we're moving on to how, Ryan, would you summon Vortex Dragon? To that I say, you summon Odd Eye's Absolute Dragon. So Absolute Dragon. When any player's monster declares an attack, you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card, negate the attack, then you can special summon 1 Odd Eyes monster from your hand or graveyard. Not going to use that. If this Xyz summon card is sent to the graveyard in any way, you can special summon 1 Odd Eyes monster from your extra deck, except Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. You can only use each effect of Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon once per turn. So you destroy this. That means you can use it for a Link summon or something, and summon out Vortex. Very, very powerful. Now, for the Link monsters, I'm not going to go over the Link I'm not going to go over Witch's Apprentice or Summon Sorceress, because anyone interested in this deck probably will know what they do by now. But I will cover the 2 really important ones. So we've got Heavy Metal Foes Electromite. He's Link 2 for 2 Pendulum monsters. If he's Link summoned, you can add 1 Pendulum monster from your deck to your extra deck face up. Once per turn, you can target 1 other face up card you control, destroy it, then add a Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand. If a card in your Pendulum zone leaves the field, draw 1 card. You can only use this effect of Heavy Metal Foes Electromite once per turn. And then, last but not least, Zephyr Metaltron, Link 3, all arrows pointing down, very good. 2+ monsters special summon from the extra deck. If a monster this card points to that was special summoned from the extra deck is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, add 1 monster from your graveyard or face-up Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand. You can target 1 monster on each player's field that was special summoned from the extra deck, except this card, banish both until the end phase. So thanks to any